The lights from the rooftop glimmered like stars over downtown Austin, but Ethan Cole sat alone on the terrace, far from the laughter behind the glass. Inside the private dining room, his family raised their glasses, celebrating the man who wasn't even invited in. His older brother, Gavin, stood confidently at the center of it all, toasting their father's legacy and the bright new era for Coltech Solutions. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. Not a single person looked toward the quiet man outside. Ethan didn't care. Not anymore. He watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows as his sister Chloe laughed beside investors who used to call him the brain of the company. His father beamed, proud of the future they had built. Ethan sipped the same 18-year-old scotch he once bought for his father's milestone birthday, back when they were still a team, back when he mattered. The waiter approached, unsure. "Would you like to order, sir?" Ethan nodded. "Just the grilled salmon." And when they ask for the check, he gestured toward the party. "Tell them it's been taken care of." The waiter blinked. "You're paying for the whole event?" Food, drinks, service fee, everything. Add a 25% gratuity for the staff. And one more thing, Ethan pulled a small envelope from his jacket. "Deliver this once I'm gone." The note inside was brief. No anger, no plea. "It's congratulations. A gift from the man you left behind." As he rose from his seat and walked calmly into the warm Texas night, the celebration behind him roared louder, but none of them noticed he was gone. Thought he'd disappeared. What they didn't realize was that Ethan Cole had already started writing the next chapter, and they weren't in it. 15 years earlier, Coltech Solutions was nothing more than an idea scribbled on a napkin during a family dinner. Gerald Cole had the vision, a streamlined app to simplify enterprise resource planning for small businesses, but it was his middle son, Ethan, who turned that vision into a functioning business, while Gavin chased venture capital and Chloe pitched PR campaigns. Ethan stayed behind closed doors, running cash flow models, negotiating vendor contracts, and setting up payroll systems before anyone else even knew they'd need them. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but he was always the first to arrive. They launched out of a shared office space in South Austin with 3 employees and a loan from their uncle. Within 2 years, Ethan had doubled revenue and established a scalable financial infrastructure that made investors take notice. While Gavin soaked up the spotlight at tech expos and Chloe handled partnership deals, Ethan quietly led the back end. He missed a lot along the way, his honeymoon cut short by a server crash, his 5th anniversary forgotten under a pile of contracts. Eventually, his wife left, said she was tired of feeling like a line item on his calendar. Ethan barely flinched. Coltech was his purpose, his identity, his family legacy. But as the years passed, so did the recognition. Gavin became the face of the company, Chloe the media darling, and Ethan, he became invisible, just the numbers guy. Still, he kept going. Not for applause, not for titles, but because he believed in what they were building. Until the day they decided he wasn't needed anymore. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, quiet, calculated, and gut-wrenchingly familiar. Gerald Cole summoned Ethan to his office with the same tone he'd used when discussing quarterly budgets or logistics upgrades. Nothing about it felt like a farewell. Ethan took his usual seat across from the old oak desk, where so many of their biggest decisions had been made. Gerald didn't waste time. "Ethan," he began, "you've always been the foundation, the one who kept things steady." He paused, adjusting his cufflinks like the weight of the conversation made him uncomfortable. "But the company's evolving. We need a new kind of leadership now. Vision. Momentum. Ethan didn't respond. Not yet. He'd heard these words before, in boardrooms when older executives were eased into retirement, in memos that marked polite exits. He waited for the part where he still fit in. Gavin will be stepping in as CEO, Gerald continued. Chloe will remain in charge of brand growth. We're also bringing in a new CFO, someone from Stanford. Fresh eyes. Ethan blinked once. And me? Gerald looked down at a legal pad filled with bullet points. You'll be moved into an advisory role, board member, no day-to-day work, less pressure. You've earned that, son. Ethan's hands didn't move. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. So, after 15 years, I'm being pushed aside? Pushed. Transitioned, his father said quickly. It's what's best for the company. Ethan stood slowly. Was this unanimous? Gerald hesitated. Gavin and Chloe, they both agree, you've done enough. The words hit like an uppercut. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't plead. He just nodded once. Cold. That evening, a formal HR notice arrived in his inbox. His badge would be deactivated by Monday. The new CFO would start Tuesday. 15 years of loyalty erased in 2 meetings. They thought he'd walk away quietly. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The invitation never came, but Ethan showed up anyway. Gerald Cole's retirement dinner was held at The Haven, an upscale rooftop restaurant known for its panoramic views of downtown Austin and its extravagant pre-feast menus. The Cole family had booked out the entire indoor lounge, complete with a private bar and LED screens cycling through slideshows of the company's journey. Ethan arrived 15 minutes early and requested a table on the terrace, the only one that overlooked the glass wall separating him from his family. He wore the same midnight blue suit he had worn the day Coltech landed its first $10 million, 0 cents, round fact, when his name still meant something. Inside, Gavin schmoozed with investors, while Chloe took selfies with former colleagues. Gerald stood at the head of the table, smiling as if nothing had ever gone wrong. To them, this was a coronation, a passing of the torch. To Ethan, it was confirmation. They had erased him completely. As servers carried in trays of grilled sea bass and champagne, Ethan sipped a neat glass of Oban 18, the same bottle he once gifted his father for his 60th birthday. The waiter approached with hesitation, clearly confused as to why this well-dressed man sat alone. "Would you like to order, sir?" Ethan nodded. "The salmon. And when they ask for the bill," he said, motioning toward the glass wall, "tell them it's been covered." The waiter blinked. The entire party? Food, drinks, gratuity. And one more thing. Ethan slid a small envelope across the table. "Deliver this once I've left." As laughter and applause erupted behind the glass, Ethan finished his meal in silence. No one looked outside. No one noticed. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out into the warm night air, leaving only a note that read, "Congratulations, a gift from the man who kept the lights on." Ethan didn't fall apart. He didn't spiral into bitterness or revenge fantasies. Instead, he vanished, quietly, methodically, like a man stepping into a new identity. Within a week, he packed up his townhouse in the Domain and relocated to a modest A-frame cabin on the edge of Lake Travis. But it wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. Just trees, water, and the sound of wind instead of corporate chatter. There, with a battered laptop and a decade's worth of industry knowledge, he founded Cole Strategies, a financial consulting firm specializing in helping mid-sized startups avoid the very traps that were slowly swallowing Coltech. He didn't advertise. He didn't post a bitter manifesto on LinkedIn. He simply reached out to a handful of old contacts, people who trusted his judgment, who remembered the quiet force behind the company's meteoric rise. The response was immediate. Word spread. And unlike his time at Coltech, Ethan controlled everything. His hours, his vision, his legacy. He hired a part-time assistant, then a junior analyst. He didn't work 80-hour weeks anymore. He read again, cooked for himself, took evening walks. Placed by the sharp edges of betrayal dulled, replaced by the quiet hum of purpose on his own terms. But even in his peace, he watched. Coltech's name still popped up in trade blogs and newsletters. The headlines grew less flattering. Product delays, executive churn, dissatisfied clients. Ethan said nothing, made no public comment, but late at night, he'd review financial filings and company updates, not as an outsider, not out of spite, but as a man who had once loved what he helped build. And somewhere deep inside, he knew the real fallout hadn't even started yet. It started as a whisper in niche forums, startup founders grumbling about long response times, botched invoices, and vague promises from Coltech's new leadership. Ethan didn't need confirmation, but it came anyway. A former project manager quietly messaged him on LinkedIn. "It's chaos in there. No one's steering the ship." Gavin, now acting CEO, had launched a flashy new initiative, ColSync, a sync feature no one asked for. Meanwhile, Chloe's revamped partner strategy backfired, locking the company into overpriced contracts with vendors who couldn't deliver. The new CFO, a polished Ivy Leaguer who lasted exactly 6 weeks before quietly resigning, citing misalignment of expectation. Ethan watched it all unfold with surgical detachment. Every headline, every leaked memo, every client pulling away, it was all predicted in the models he'd once built, but no one had listened. He'd been labeled too cautious, too conservative, the guy who kept saying no to risk. Now, the company was bleeding from 1,000 cuts, and no one could stop the hemorrhaging. One evening, an anonymous envelope arrived at Ethan's cabin. No return address, just a typed note inside. "They're in over their heads. Just thought you should know." Attached was a screenshot from an internal Slack thread, Gavin asking his exec team if anyone had seen the old cash burn report Ethan used to run. Ethan stared at it for a long time, then folded the paper neatly and filed it away. He didn't gloat. He didn't call anyone to say, "I told you so." He simply poured a glass of wine, stepped onto his porch, and watched the sun dip below the hill. Because this wasn't about vengeance. It was about inevitability. And deep down, Ethan knew. The crash was no longer a question. It was a countdown. The unraveling came swiftly, like a dam cracking all at once. Coltech's Q2 earnings were released to stunned silence. Revenue had dropped by 37%. Their once stellar customer retention was in freefall, and several high-profile enterprise clients had quietly severed contracts. Investors panicked. Tech blogs pounced. Words like overleveraged, mismanaged, and executive blind spots. Internally, things were worse. Layoffs swept through departments like a wildfire. Gavin froze hiring, slashed budgets, and began ghosting longtime partners. Chloe scrambled to spin a PR campaign that no one believed, and all the while, Gerald Cole remained quiet, too proud to admit. Ethan didn't say a word. He just watched. And then the calls began. Chloe reached out first, her voicemail carefully upbeat. "Hey, just checking in. Maybe we could catch up sometime." Then Gerald, his voice tired. "We might need some insight on the financial side. Just as an advisor, of course." And finally Gavin, once cocky, now subdued. "Ethan, I'll cut to it. We could really use your help. There's..." Ethan sat in silence, listening to each message with the calm detachment of a man who had already grieved. He could almost admire the symmetry. The very people who once erased him now came crawling back, begging for the foundation they'd shattered to hold again. That evening, he returned a single call. His father. "I'm not coming back," Ethan said, "but I might know someone who can help." Gerald exhaled into the phone, slow and shaky. "Thank you." "I'm not doing it for you," Ethan replied. "I'm doing it for the people who don't deserve to lose their jobs because you mistook ego for vision." Then he hung up. Not threats. No apologies. Just clarity. Ethan didn't swoop in like a savior. He moved like a strategist. Quiet, deliberate. Within 48 hours of that call, he reached out to an equity group he'd built trust with over the years, Travis Capital Partners, a firm known for reviving failing tech companies with sound fundamentals and broken leadership. They weren't doing this out of charity. They saw value buried beneath Coltech's collapse. An established brand, untapped market potential, and a loyal base of engineers and developers desperate for stability. Ethan laid out the opportunity, but with non-negotiable conditions. First, Gavin and Chloe had to resign from all operational roles. They could stay on the board in name only, symbolic, no voting power, no access to internal systems. Second, Gerald would be moved into an honorary chairman role, just enough to save face in the press, but completely removed from decisions. Lastly, the new leadership team would be hand-picked by Travis Capital, not inherited from the broken shell that had nearly run the company into the ground. Gerald balked. "That's a lot to ask," he said, voice low. "They're still my children." Ethan's reply was cold, but fair. So was I. When the proposal reached the boardroom, the reactions were predictable. Gavin lashed out, accused Ethan of betrayal. Chloe tried to bargain, but the numbers didn't lie. With no cash runway and a shrinking client base, the company was days from defaulting on its debt. Backed into a corner, they relented. The deal was signed by the end of the week. Coltech Solutions would survive, but it would no longer be there. Ethan didn't ask for a title. He didn't request equity. When offered the CFO position under the new regime, he politely declined. "I already built something I'm proud of," he said. "I'm not going backwards." Then he walked out of the boardroom for the final time. 1 year to the day. Same rooftop, same golden skyline melting over downtown Austin. But this time, the celebration inside the Haven had a different tone. The Cole family was gathered again, now flanked by executives from Travis Capital and the newly appointed leadership team of Coltech. They were toasting the company's survival, its rebirth under new hands, and its regained foothold in the industry. Gavin and Chloe sat near the end of the table, no longer at the head, smiling politely, their roles now ceremonial. Gerald, older and visibly quieter, nodded along during speeches, but said very little. The energy wasn't triumph, it was relief. And outside, alone once again, Ethan Cole watched it all. He had been invited multiple times, by phone, by email, even through a handwritten note from his mother. "Please come. It would mean everything to your father, to all of us." But Ethan had declined. He didn't need the applause. He didn't need the recognition. Instead, he made a reservation for the same corner table on the same terrace, ordered the same grilled salmon, sipped the same. As he watched them through the glass, older, quieter, maybe wiser, he felt nothing but peace. No more bitterness, no lingering anger, just closure. When the waiter came to settle his bill, Ethan handed him an envelope and his credit card. "Please deliver this when they ask for the check," he said gently. Inside was a short note written in his own handwriting, "Wishing you all the best in your new roles." The waiter looked at him, eyes softening with recognition. "You were here last year too, weren't you?" Ethan nodded with a small smile. Same table, same view, just a different story now. Then he stood, nodded once more toward the glass, and walked into the night, free, whole, and finally unburdened. The drive back to his lakeside cabin was quiet, the kind of silence that didn't ache anymore. The windows were down, warm Texas air rushing through, carrying with it the distant hum of city lights and fading celebration. Ethan didn't check his phone, though it buzzed twice in the passenger seat, likely voicemails from Gerald, maybe even Chloe or Gavin. He wasn't avoiding them, he just wasn't in a rush. At home, he kicked off his shoes, loosened his collar, and stepped onto the back deck overlooking Lake Travis. The moonlight rippled across the water like glass, shifting in slow motion. This wasn't revenge, it was restoration. He had rebuilt something from the ashes, not Coltech, but himself. Cole Strategies was thriving, with 12 full-time employees and clients across 5 states. Not bad for a firm that began with a laptop, a folding chair, and a man everyone had counted out. More importantly, he built a life with boundaries. And the best part? He didn't need to prove anything anymore. Let them have their title ceremonies and corporate brunches. Let them patch their legacy back together with borrowed hands. Ethan had already done what they couldn't. He let go, not with bitterness, but with clarity. He thought of the younger version of himself, the man who once believed love had to be earned through sacrifice, who poured himself into spreadsheets, ignored birthdays, and mistook silence for strength. That man was gone. In his place stood someone whole. As the wind swept through the oaks behind him, Ethan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. No more boardrooms. No more waiting for validation. Just peace. He didn't need a seat at their table anymore because he'd already built his own, and this one would never betray him. Ethan's story is a powerful reminder that true worth isn't found in titles or family approval. It's built through quiet integrity, resilience, and the courage to walk away when you're no longer valued. For years, he gave everything to a company and a family that discarded him without hesitation. But instead of lashing out, he rebuilt. His journey shows us that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success on your own terms. It's the strength to say, I'm enough, even without you. If you've ever felt overlooked, betrayed, or replaced by people who should have had your back, know this: you can start over, you can rise without rage, and you can thrive in silence. We share stories like Ethan's to remind you that healing is possible and dignity is never lost when you stand in your truth. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue bringing real, emotional stories that inspire strength through adversity. You're not alone, and your next chapter can start today.